Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 3 of Public Health Emergency Preparedness. During the past 2 weeks, you learned about the organizational structure and some of the procedures involved in emergency preparedness. And now you've completed those required FEMA courses that are needed to work within that structure. So we can move on now to topics in emergency preparedness that you'll likely find a bit more interesting. So this week, what we're going to discuss is effective risk communication and how to adjust our communication, not just based on the audience and disaster stage, but also on the fear factor. So first of all, what is effective communication? Well, effective communication is clear. And by clear, I mean non-technical, uses plain language. And you can check the clarity of your communication by using a readability test tool or by using something like the SMOG, which stands for the Simplified Measure of Gobbledygook, which is a readability formula. You could check on Wiki and just enter SMOG, and you can read about that if you're unfamiliar with that. But these are tools that are often used in health literacy. And what one has to remember is that the average reading level in the United States is about 5th grade. So though this is, of course, very, area and group specific, it's something to take into consideration in your communication. You're an expert in the field, but your audience may not be. So clear, non-technical, simple language is important in our communications. Another important thing is to use diverse media. So print, voice, visual resources. And the reason for this is, of course, that not everybody can read, see, or hear. So it's very important if you're getting a message out in a public health emergency or in a preparedness setting that you use diverse forms of media. Next, a very difficult thing for people to recognize, but critical, is that there is no one public. People talk about public communication, talking to the public. There is no one public. There are many segments of the public, and our communication forms and the information we provide has to recognize that. Communicating with the disabled, the elderly, children, all of that is going to differ, and we have to take that into consideration. Who is your audience, and do you have multiple audiences? Next, what we need to remember is that our communication must be consistent, or when it cannot be consistent because circumstances have changed, we too have to explain that change. And finally, we want to make sure the information is repeated. Repetition, preferably in different formats, is important. Another thing that we really need to do in our communications is tell people what they can do. Telling people what they can do before, during, and after an event really empowers people. It gives people a sense of control when they feel that they are participating and working towards resolution. Now, when do we communicate? Well, we communicate before, after, and during events. But before an event is actually one of the most important forms of communication. Educating the community can begin at home when adults have been well informed. And there are many national preparedness events each year, such as the FEMA Prepare-a-thon, shown here on the right in South Boston. And FEMA also partners with companies such as Home Depot for National Preparedness Day. And then there is a National Preparedness Month, which is usually in September. But local communities, too, can often plan their own events to help the community become prepared in advance for any hazards that are relevant. An example would be one town I lived in. They had a preparedness potluck, which I thought was an interesting idea, where participants, in addition to a food donation, brought an empty backpack for each family member. And the backpack was then filled with items needed for a 24-hour kit for a nominal fee because the local businesses donated or subsidized the needed items. Well, this at least gives people a sense, again, that they have some form of control. If they're asked to evacuate, they feel as if they have what's needed to take care of their families for 24 hours while being transported to another location. So remember, and this is really important, that communicating before an event helps people to understand a hazard and its risks and prepare for it. And that results in less fear and panic when the real event occurs. So we also need to communicate during an event. And our goal during an event is to provide clear, concise instructions, giving people specific tasks to do to help themselves and others, alleviates fear and provides a sense of control. Now, after an event, the primary goal really is to provide information on aid and resources. So how to rebuild, relocate, deal with grief, displacement, insurance, etc. So what are the logistics for this week in the course? This week you'll be reading the Crisis Emergency Risk Communication Summary and Wallet Guide, which I would encourage you to print. And in your discussion this week, you're going to critique a communication relating to a public health emergency that did not meet the recommended guidelines, and take a look at the impact of one not doing that. You'll also complete a really interesting training on risk communications, which I think you'll really enjoy. So that's it for this week, but remember that effective and appropriate communications is probably the most important skill a public health professional can bring to a public health emergency. Good communication can truly save lives. So best wishes, everybody, on developing great skills this week, and I wish you all a successful week.